All right. Why don't we get started? Hopefully our last guest will be here soon. But yeah, let's jump into it. Thank you all for being here. This is the Reverie Roundtable, which we have Mondays 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for being around. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And consider becoming a YouTube member, supporting us that way by hitting that join button. Okay, we are going to go down the line here and introduce our amazing guests. First, Top Dolphin, also named Adam. Adam, it's a good guy. I like hanging out with them. Comes through sometimes. On our YouTube streams, we have a good time over there. How are you doing, Top Dolphin?
I'm doing great. It's my day off work. I got a nice full night's rest of sleep. Had a nice salami sandwich, and now I'm on the panel ready to talk about some fun topics with people who are here and also the people who are late.
But yeah, thank you so much for that. That sounds like a perfect afternoon, right? You just
It was great. It was perfect.
Tell us. You'll have to tell us more about the salami sandwich. But thank you, Scott, for being here as well. Baby Olivia Scott is here. Glad to have you around, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I had to take my mom to the hospital. Don't worry, not an emergency or anything. She was just like standard shit at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, I could pimp my channel or whatever, but you guys know me. You love to hate me. It's Fabian Liberty. I'm Scott. But I noticed two things. Like the first thing I noticed was like how crazy it was to see everybody wearing a mask, because like in Virginia that's like not that common. And I was like, oh, but it is a hospital, so it makes sense. But the more important thing that I noticed was that like none of the doctors and nurses were overweight. And I was like, oh, this is like the last profession in America where like a good third of the people aren't overweight and unhealthy. It's like doctors and nurses. And I was like, oh man, we should maybe pay attention to this. I don't know. It was like a surreal thing. It was like, where did all these skinny people come from? It was a fun experience this morning.
That was a random
Inspiring.
shot at overweight people. But okay, great.
Well, I mean, being overweight is obviously bad. Like I'm overweight. Like you should fix it if you're overweight. Like, which is interesting.
Sounds like an after panel topic.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I'm doing. I was like, this is what I did today.
Well, all right. Well, we'll deal with that. So next we have Wick. My man Wick is here. Wick, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for being a part of this. How are you doing?
Oh, so far so good, but the night's just started. I had an excellent panel that we just got done with. Stabby says hi, Prime. I was told to tell you that. We talked about whether it's morally okay to celebrate or mock the death of our enemies, and it was spicy. You can, if you like Prime's panels, you might like mine. I tend to do earlier in the day than he does, and you can always find me here as well. You can find me at twitch.tv/deathofcertainty, all one word. But yeah. Really eager to get into tonight's topics too. It should be fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've talked about that here before. I'm pretty sure Doobie was part of that discussion. We talked about when Rush Limbaugh died. I was like, go fuck yourself. I was like actively taking pleasure, right? We had a little celebration here when he died, because rest in piss. I'm like, fuck that guy.
Ashamed of yourself.
What'd you say?
Should be ashamed of yourself. I'll rush both did nothing wrong.
Okay, all right, okay, whatever. But yeah, we had like it's a really spicy topic. So I'm sure you.
How you gonna get awkward and mad at me for saying that like doctors are healthier than the general population? You're over here saying rest and piss on people. Get the fuck out of here.
Because fuck Rush Limbaugh for everything that he did. He literally made this world worse, right? Like he did everything in his power to make people more miserable here, right? While enriching himself. He's a garbage human being. Rest in piss, Rush Limbaugh. Fuck you.
But his radio show is really funny.
Everything the PrimeCayes says about Rush Limbaugh, I also feel about overweight people.
Okay, all right.
What the fuck is happening?
A good point, actually. Yeah, Fabian wins that one. I gotta
say. It's gonna be a great panel.
Scott,
sure.
your fucking name confuses me. Just change it to Scott. I swear to God.
Yes, we're right. All right,
I don't know where duo stream. It's just it happens.
Eucharist. You are a reasonable conservative here, right? You're the good guy, right? One of the good ones. So Eucharist. Thanks for being
I
around.
attempt to be. I also hated Rush Limbaugh, so that's I guess our one point of solidarity. I have nothing to plug and nothing interesting to say, except I will note to Scott's point about healthcare workers being healthier. Did you know that healthcare workers tend to smoke at high rates than the general American population, and that's actually gotten much worse during the pandemic. Understandably, you get stressed
Well, there's stress
working on a
dealing with all
COVID
the
floor.
overweight people.
Yeah. You smoke a lot, but yeah, before the pandemic, it was 16% of healthcare workers and a much higher percent of licensed nurse practitioners, 25% of licensed nurse or practical nurses, nurse practitioners smoked. So yeah, maybe they're not as healthy as they look. I don't know. Most of the people that I know that smoke are skinny and they're still unhealthy. So okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris, for laying that down. All right, next we have a person we haven't seen in like a year plus. We have Layman. Layman is back with us. Hey, right? Layman. I'm actually quite excited. Layman is a person you would see on my panels quite often. I feel like a lot of our people who had disappeared are coming back, right? Unfortunately, Layman is not any less Canadian, and despite my best attempts at reforming him,
You're a
he's...
racist piece of shit. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Thank you for being here, Layman. Sorry, Jorby. Or no, Layman. Okay, so now it's... Which name would you like me to use?
The one I'm using. That one.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Layman. All right. Okay, but Layman, thanks for being around.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so yeah, I am Layman, as Prime likes to pronounce it. I used to come into panels a lot. I took a mental health break, and now I plan on just using panels as like a fun little rhetorical exercise to test my rhetoric and also to like develop confidence in myself, because I do local politics now. So or I'm getting into local politics now. So I'm starting to engage in that more and dedicate more time towards it. And yeah, I am my political ideology. I'm an anarcho-Canadian. That means it means whatever you want it to mean. So yeah.
As long as it means you're working towards the annexation of Canada by the USA, then
it means I hate you.
It's another word.
I don't think
it's
we
another
want
word
all
for
of Canada.
anarcho-pacifism, right?
There's a lot of useless Canada out there.
Yeah.
Canadian
You just take like the parts close to us, and then like they can have the north.
I'll take a lot of our parts have natural resources that we can exploit, like good fucking Americans. Yeah, that's what I'll take.
I'll take Alaska.
Alaska.
I'll take Alaska. Okay, we deserve Alaska.
Next,
That's where all our oil is, right?
my man Joe Lewis is here, right? We call him an MVP. Joe Lewis, thanks for stopping by. Joe Lewis, did you say you moved? I forget. Did you say you moved?
No, I moved in July.
Oh,
So,
okay. All
I
right.
got a couple more.
Your
more
background is different, so I thought like, oh, maybe you.
weeks. Yeah. I moved things around to kind of like make the process easier. So yeah, it's all. I don't know.
Okay.
I got nothing to plug right now. Yeah, just glad to be here.
Joe Lewis is a great
Been
guy.
a bit.
All right, next, not quite last, and definitely one of the best. Our Dark Lord and Savior Doobie is here. Thank you, Doobie, for stopping by and being part of yet another one of my panels. It makes them a lot better. How you doing, Doobie?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, all right. Let's just jump into it. All right. There is a growing trend in Hollywood to fill traditionally white roles with minority actors. The Percy Jackson series is being rebooted, with 2 out of the 3 main actors being minorities. The next Doctor Who will be a black man. Do you consider this to be a positive trend? Is this the answer to a lack of representation in media? Is it ever fair for white people to be resentful of these changes? So yeah, you see this all the time. You see this in Marvel films. You see this in lots of things that Disney produces, really. You see it in TV shows. You see it all over the place. And I'm wondering, does this make sense? This is a question I've asked to black people plenty of times. We've talked about it plenty of times, but I really talked to the other races about it, so I brought you all in.
Or in general, he rarely talks to the other races, guys.
I try to limit my contact, except for the women. But okay, we will go to.
Yeah, we hate those. We hate those here. Yeah.
Hey, would you like to make a trade? Hey.
We'll start with a black
going.
person to lead off the conversation, right? As always should be the case. Top Dolphin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, first off, I think it's probably good to like have like different minorities represented, and I not just minorities, but all groups of people should have like representation in media. And I don't think it's necessarily bad to like change the skin color of characters and stuff like that. I think it seems kind of weird if the only good character, the only thing you can do is you can take like characters that were already created and then like make them black or Asian or whatever, or like make them women. Why not like create new interesting characters? At the same time, Hollywood is kind of doing this thing where they just reboot everything and don't make anything original. So that's like also like kind of a case. If you care about Percy Jackson being changed, the movies for that were garbage. So maybe like recasting some of the cast might be a good idea. But overall, I'm not like against it. It just seems kind of weird sometimes. It can seem kind of weird if there's like massively popular franchises and they just like change the race or the gender of like characters instead of like creating new characters that are like that are this way from the ground up. And I can understand a little bit of the backlash between from people who are like, oh my god, why are they changing this childhood character who I liked very much? They don't look the same. But if it's been so long, like, stop crying. It's not a big deal.
Let's go to Scott.
Yeah, so I think this is offensive on like every single level, and is something that nobody wants, right? I don't think this does anything for anyone, and because I mean, like on one level, you have with the ones that were referenced, I don't think anybody really cares about the Percy Jackson thing. I think it's more about like recognizing the pattern. Same thing with the Doctor Who. It's like the new Doctor Who can be any race. Like I don't know, like that's not really a race swap. It's just picking the next person. But I mean, like when you see, you know, shows like Anne Boleyn being cast as a black person produced by BBC, right? Like you're like, who the fuck is this for? Right? This isn't telling black stories. This isn't representing black people or their history or their culture or their ancestry. No, it's like woke fucking praxis from like Hollywood fucking lefties so that they can get seal claps from other white liberals that fucking hate their own race. And everyone can be like, yay, representation, except it's meaningless representation. Like what black person sat down on their couch and watched Anne Boleyn as a black woman and was like, man, I'm really tied to like a story that I didn't know before that like, you know, makes me think of me and my family and our culture and what we've done and the stories and the way that we've impacted the world. No, you just took white people's thing and then switched out an actress and didn't change anything about it. So you pissed off conservatives that clearly see that you're attacking their culture and that you're attempting like this weird dynamic to be like, oh, is The Witcher a TV show based in Poland? You know, is the book based in Poland? Is the game based in Poland? Like from all that period? And is it a ginger? Oh, well, we'll just turn it into a person of color because reasons. But you didn't tell a black story. So the entire thing is, in summation, is just fucking woke praxis that nobody fucking wants except for self-deprivating white people, which are like not even a large percentage of the population. And it's an insult to minorities, and it's an insult to people's culture that is actually somewhat tied to these things. It's just shit from every perspective. Give me a fucking movie about Aksum. Give me a movie about Kush. Give me a movie about Mali and Songhai. Like, give me some interesting shit from Africa and from history, and I'll watch it. But this shit is stupid.
Wick, please.
Okay, so I think everyone recognizes that most of us here would recognize representation is generally a good thing. We want more representation, right? But how we are represented matters. In a lot of cases, when you have a iconic figure or an iconic storyline, it is respectful to the fans to stay as true as possible to the franchise, to the book, or to the thing. That means that the characters look like the characters are portrayed in the books or whatever IP source it's from. That said, I think there is a place to change it up just a little here and there, right? It's all on how you do it and how you go about it. And I will say that it does feel performative in a lot of cases when a show will come out and it's like, well, we have the newest the newest installment of this show, right? And look, we changed the race or the gender of the character. Why? Well, it doesn't really change the character at all, but we just did it because we want woke points, as Fabian Liberty Scott said, right? Um, I think it can be done right, and I think it can be done wrong, and I think it's trending, at least recently. Come on, like, we need if you want to change the actor, great, but don't change the actor just for representation, right? Like, I think representation is important, but it's how we do it that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. You, Chris.
Yeah, so I wanted to deal with the two specific cases you brought up before I get to the broader question. The first one, Percy Jackson. There's really no reason within the story why those two characters can't be non-white. One's a satyr, and one is a literal brainchild of Athena. She's miraculously born in an asexual relationship and given to a lover as a gift. So she could just as well be black if the lover is black. It doesn't matter. Like, it literally doesn't matter in the story. If anyone's been out of shape about stories inspired by Greek and Roman myth being ethnically diverse, they need to actually read the myths and learn something about the ethnic makeup around the Mediterranean Sea, Turkey, North Africa, Egypt, etc. Doctor Who's a fucking fantasy. Like, if anybody's mad about these, it's dumb. It doesn't matter. But broader question, what do we do with like the insertion of racially diverse characters in these stories, perhaps adaptations of stories we know and love? What I care most about is like good art, and that's going to depend on the story, it's going to depend on the source material, it's going to depend on the medium. You can tell good stories with actors of any race. I think what I care about is that the casting isn't distracting. And so what is distracting for me might be different from what's distracting for a racist. But what I mean by distracting is if you tell a story about a group of people, right, that's like supposed to be ethnically homogenous, let's say they've been kind of isolated from society for hundreds, thousands of years, don't just have a random person of a different race without a story reason for them being there, right? If you're doing a historically immersive biopic, right, casting historical figures we've already mentioned as a different race dramatically, that can be distracting. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule. But for example, if you're doing like a hip-hop influenced stage play interpretation of the American founding, I don't give a crap who you cast, right? This is by virtue of the medium. The stage allows more suspension of disbelief. Casting can be more fluid, right? I think I just want good art. Give me a reason why you're doing this, and I probably won't care.
Okay, thank you. Layman.
Yeah, so my opinion on this is that we should do everything we can to not treat different races of people as more morally relevant than others. So I think if you're going to make a film or some kind of piece of art or media, I think if you enact some sort of quota to increase the representation of different races of people over others in media, that risks treating certain races of people as more morally relevant than others. So I would have an issue with that on those grounds. There are some exceptions that I would have. So like 12 Years a Slave would be a good example, because you have to hire like white people as slave masters and like black people as slaves or something like that in order to represent that story in that historical period of time accurately, in order to educate people like further on, what happened during that time, just make sure that it's accurate. If you happen to be hiring somebody for something like Doctor Who, for example, which race isn't a relevant characteristic in Doctor Who, so you shouldn't be hiring people on the basis of that, then I don't care about that. That's fine as long as, again, it's not some like, diversity quota of some kind. I don't have an issue with it. But if you're like hiring a black person because, they're the best fit for that role, then I think that's a good thing. So yeah, that's my take.
Thank you. Go, Lewis.
I don't know, man. I guess my take is kind of boring on this. I just kind of want non-white people to exist in media without their racialization being at the forefront of their character arc, or demanding that there needs to be some justification as to why they need to be X or Y race. Like, I think minorities can just be people in media, and I think that's probably fine. I mean, like, obviously there's people who believe in like shit like white erasure, and they'll be upset about it because like, oh my god, black people, cancel my Netflix subscription. But it's like, hey, I mean, I don't know, just let minorities be minorities. Like, I don't know why it's such a difficult concept, because it seems like we keep having this like similar conversation anytime there's like a racialized character in a piece of media. And then like it gets really, really loud when the trend is like white main character, like for Doctor Who, for instance. Like it's like, can't just a black person from another country just be a black person and nobody lose their fucking shit? I mean, granted, like, I haven't seen much of like a buzz from Percy Jackson or Doctor Who, but yeah, I just think we should just let non-white people just exist and not like let their racialization be the forefront as to why they need to be in it, or like why we need to argue their like existence in the media.
Thank you so much. Next, we have the Wizard of Weed.
Thank you. See, I knew you would say it eventually, Prime. I didn't even know I had it there, to be honest. Like that surprised me too. I'm surprised by this too, Prime. We all surprised by this. No, thank you for having me. Yeah, no, like I'm going like mirroring what Joe said, like almost exactly. Yo, just let black people be black people. Like we don't want y'all roles. Like it just happened. If you look at the Doctor Who shit, like he was done with the auditions. This dude came in and stole it from everyone else. He was the last one. It's just like if we're talking historicals like a layman was, I can understand that, right? We have the book to look at, we have the reference, but it's like most shows and shit, bro. It's fantasy, bro. Black people can exist in sci-fi. Black people can exist in fantasy. It's not like, we're stuck with the genre of historical realism, specifically slavery and the Civil War. Like, no, we can be in other shit. Just let us. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's my statement.
Thank you so much. All right, last but not least, Doobie, please.
I totally agree with everything Fabian said. I think that it's bullshit. I think it is white erasure. I think it's white erasure for the purposes of like woke points that don't make any sense. I don't think there's a good reason. These companies typically give this reason where they say that, hey, if we had a movie about African folklore or South American folklore, nobody would watch it. That reason has been totally blown out of the water in the last decade. Coco, fucking massive a movie for the studio that produced it. Moana, Big Hero 6, Ray and the Last Dragon, all these Encanto, all these movies did really, really well. And they're movies that are about black and brown people, where they didn't need to do any white erasure. They told a story about this culture with these people, and nobody gave a fuck because that's what the story is, right? People care when you start reaching into European folklore, European folktales that have been passed down for thousands of years, and haphazardly sticking in black and brown people where it doesn't make any fucking sense to win woke points. That's why people get upset. It has nothing to do with people being upset. There's a brown person on the screen. In the case of like Percy Jackson, they actually did this in the first movie, but there wasn't a lot of buzz around it back then. But the satyr, the fawn guy, the guy with the goat legs. So in the book, he's actually white because it's a Greek story, right? So he's white in the book. In the movie, they made him black for some reason, right? So just weird shit like this that I can understand if you're a fan of the franchise and suddenly, you hear that they're adapting this story to the movie screen, and suddenly everybody's a different race and has disabilities and whatever the fuck because they wanted to be diverse. Like it's just really fucking weird. It's lazy, it's stupid, and we shouldn't let them get away with it.
Oh boy, Doobie, god damn it. So I'll give my opinion on this quickly. I feel I line almost perfectly with you, Chris, here. It's interesting that people get upset over these things, right? Like I guess I'm a synthesis with some of what Doobie said, because one, I would love to have like original black stories, right? Like from like Africa. There's so many amazing myths, right, that we could introduce to the world that we never do. That like we go back to Greek all the goddamn time. Like I think we got it now, guys. I think we got it. And they're interesting stories, without a doubt. But there are others out there from other cultures that we never experience. So I'd love to see more of that. But like I think there is some worth and some there's some storytelling to be done within these other roles, right? When the people are when these races are switched, right? I like what Joe said. Like, why does it have to be that big of a deal? Most of the times, when it's just a different actor, right? And it doesn't actually affect the story in any particular way. It's just, hey, a good actor, right? Like the best actor for the job. Why not? I'll start there, but there's something Layman said. I'm going to go back to that much later on because that's interesting. Go ahead, guys.
But but that's not what's happening, right? Like Joe Lewis and Wizard of Weed, right? Or what is it? The Pyro Tyrant.
Push Paladin
Right.
Bong Crusader.
I understand that sentiment if we weren't living in a world where individuals are intentionally put in there and celebrated by taking roles or taking, especially like in fantasy, it's one thing because like there's a lot more malleability there. Like I don't know that I necessarily care that like Amazon has their new shitty version of Lord of the Rings where like they're more focused on woke shit than like actually focus on like doing any justice to Tolkien, because like a bunch of SJWs get together and surprise, surprise, they're probably shit at making productions. So like, you know, have your woke points. I won't care. Right. But it's like, but then you see things like this is why I brought up like Anne Boleyn as like a black woman. It's just it just takes you out of the story, and it's very
like
clearly
a black guy who did like
right, or like the King Arthur BBC show that they did not too long ago, where it's like King Arthur's black, and it's like this is just dumb. And the thing that I find more offensive about it than anything is that black stories aren't told and they're not brought to a white audience. It's literally creating a culture in America where instead of creating empathy for the stories and cultures that bring up the multicultural America that we have, instead, white people get a new slave movie every 3 years. And let me tell you, after a few of them, we're like, yeah, I'm not watching it. I know the fucking story. But like, where's the fucking story of like Frederick Douglass and his life? And like, you know, the role that he played in Maryland as a slave with like a white woman that was very kind and nice to him, but the institution of slavery turned her into a monster and eventually had to flee north, and him and like fucking, I don't know, make Thomas Hanks William Lloyd Garrison or something. If you're going to tell a fucking story, tell a new goddamn story. But instead, they just take an old story that is European ancestry, and then they throw some black people in there, and then they're like, celebrate the fact that we changed it with black people, and all the white people that are like, hey, that's my story, that's my ancestry. Why are you doing this? It's watering it down because these people don't give a fuck about anything, and they don't give a fuck about culture or art. They give a fuck about their social justice brownie points and doing their fucking woke praxis. And we shouldn't accept it anymore. It's trash. It's trash art. It's trash literature. It's trash everything.
I have a question for you, Scott.
Shit.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Scott, if I may, just real quick. So, you've made your point, I think, rather well on the historical things like that. But when we talk about what's actually happening, I do see a lot of pushback when fantasy stories, Lord of the Rings or Doctor Who or things, when the new woman, when the last season, I guess, of Doctor Who,
Jodie Whittaker,
when it was a woman, a lot of people push back, like, how dare you make them a woman? Like, so when we talk about what's actually happening, that's what is actually happening.
No, that's never happened. That's never happened. That's not exactly what happened. No,
yes, that's exactly what happened. I watched the show. I watched the show religiously. Like when Jodie Whittaker was announced as Doctor, there was a huge uproar because half the fandom was like, "Yo, you're changing the sex of the Doctor," and they said exactly what you said, Fabian. It's a brownie point thing. It's about fucking social justice shit. And then they kind of got validated because like the writing was just bullshit. Like I don't know what Chris Chibnall did during like those three, but it was just dog shit. I don't think it was because they chose a woman for social justice brownie points. I believe it was because the dude writing it didn't know how to write it.
Scott, you can respond to then Layman. Go ahead.
I'll be super quick, right? And that's just this. Like, I want to push back just a little bit, not so much on Wizard Wii, but Wick, right? Is like they're not just mad that a race swap happened. Right. I think you have to understand that most of the time, like there's a small minority of people that are like, oh, the fucking race swap, this is bullshit. But almost every time that this race swap happens, there's like woke fucking advertisements. And it's like, instead of telling me like why I should watch this new episode or why I should watch this movie, it's like, we did an all woman thing. And it's like, yeah, this is trash. Right. Like go read fucking like modern Marvel comics. And it's like girl power because Thor's a girl. And it's like, where's the fucking writing and story? It's because the race swap becomes the fucking story because these people are trash at fucking doing anything fucking other than performing their fucking politics into media.
You know, if your argument is like people do trash stories nowadays, I don't have a disagreement with you. I think most of Hollywood, most of comics.
But I'll shut up. I filibustered enough.
Let's go to Layman, and then Doobie, and if anyone else after that.
Yeah, so forgive my ignorance because this is not a topic that I invest hardly any time in. So I just got a question. So if you see like, okay, let's say someone does the race swap TM or whatever, right? How do you determine, just as far as your methods are concerned, because we don't really have like the insider scoop into the exact hiring process necessarily. So I guess what method would everybody use to determine, or who everyone who has this position would determine whether or not the race swap was like some like diversity quota thing or whatever for like social justice woke brownie point reasons or whatever, or they just hired a black guy because they think that they would best play that role? Like, what would the methodology be in determining that? I guess
I personally think that we like, this is my biggest problem with the outrage around it, is like no one actually waits for the art to come out. Like at the end of the day, like you watch something like the fucking all women Ghostbusters thing and you can be like, oh yeah, this is garbage, like woke points, like bullshit. But you could do something like I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example as well. Like blanking off the top of my head, but there's probably examples like this isn't like a perfect example because this is like comic canon or whatever. Or like the Miles Morales Spider-Man stuff has been like super successful. Now, to be fair, that was kind of, he was like, I think Miles Morales was originally written black, but like a lot of people saw that beforehand. Like, why are they making Spider-Man black? This is stupid. And then it comes out and like, I think like Into the Spider-Verse is like one of the best movies I've ever seen, and in the last couple years is the best shit that's ever come out. And I think like everyone gets outraged before anything even happens, like before you even can see it, before there's even like trailers for it some of the time, and like people are getting outraged and mad. And it's like, yo, if you want to like criticize people for being too woke and being woke for the sake of woke, like I'm all for it because that shit absolutely happens. But don't be like, oh, this is going to be trash before like the movie even comes out.
That's why I'm kind of confused about like the Thor example, because like the original Sin storyline was incredibly popular. And like just to be like, oh, they just made Thor, like Thor was always a mantle and they just used that as a plot device. In the original Sin storyline, Thor couldn't wield Mjolnir, gave it to Jane Foster for a little bit, and then even then there's complications because there's cancer. And even with like the Marvel continuity, like it's pretty much suggested that the places that they're going for the characters that they're using are doing some type of parallel to the comic storylines. So, like with Jane Foster and Thor: Love and Thunder being Thor, it's probably going to adopt some things from the original Sin storyline and other storylines of Marvel within that time frame of the Thor lore. So like, I don't know, Marvel's not a good example because they do this swap all the time, and it's like for fuck's sake, like they retconned or readapted Nick Fury to be black just because of a role of Samuel L. Jackson. So it's like,
also I'm pretty sure Miles. Oh, sorry.
So really quickly, so I think Top Dolphin, I think the reason that people were preemptively shitting on the Ghostbusters and the all female Ghostbusters thing is because they made wokeness such an obvious like part of their agenda, right? So they were on Twitter, they were going to like different like magazines and shit, talking about how many women were working on this movie, and within the, oh god, it's about time, you know, women are getting a place in the Ghostbusters, blah blah blah. They did this to themselves, right? So I think that was deserved. And then the movie came out and it was shit. So, but like really quickly, but I'm gonna agree with you.
What if that movie had come out well and like been really good?
Top off and
Wait, 1 second. I like to agree with you though. I think that there is some like knee jerk. So Miles Morales is a really good example because people who didn't know about Miles Morales, and not everybody who watches these movies knows anything about the comic books or the storylines there whatsoever, right? So they hear, oh god, Black Spider-Man. They assume they're gonna make Peter Parker black and tell that story with a black guy, but it's a totally different fucking dude, right? So like, when once people knew that it wasn't a problem anymore. I think they're getting a little bit of this today with I'm not gonna do any spoilers, right? But the new Doctor Strange movie that's out, there's a character in there that in the comic books has like a lesbian parents, two mothers, right? And she's gay or whatever in the comic books. So in the movie, she's that, right? And you get a little bit of the knee-jerk reaction for people saying, "Oh God, they're making Marvel woke and yada yada." But that's just who the character is. Like these people exist. It's okay to have them in these fucking movies as what they are in the comic books. But if you were to take that character, right, and replace her with a white girl or an Asian girl for no fucking reason, right? I think it would be reasonable for people who love that character in the comic books to be upset that when this character gets to the movie screen, they're a white girl, right? I think that'd be totally reasonable, and I think the opposite is reasonable, right? So I think that people get upset when it doesn't make sense in the story, and when this character has an established history that is for some reason undermined and twisted to fit like a narrative that the producers want to push.
We'll go to Layman, Wick, and yeah, these things are equal and opposite. But I'll deal with you later.
Can I make one more point just really quickly that I forgot earlier? Sure. So Fabian made a really good point earlier. Scott made a really good point earlier about how this like the kind of like empathy right? That isn't created because people don't know anything about African folklore, South American folklore, any of these things, because we just don't get it, right? We get all the European stuff because this is a primarily European country with lots of Europeans telling European stories, right? That's fine. It's totally understandable. So, and when we're in school, we hear history that's relevant to us. So we get American history, European history from where most of the Americans came from. So you get that kind of like narrative, right? And I think it leads to a lot of people just thinking that, and I've heard this fucking countless times over the years, that Africans had no culture, that no empires, had nothing before the white people got there. Right? Same thing with South America. Oh God, they were all just chasing the buffalo around all over, South America before the white people showed up and gave them civilization. It's just not fucking true, right? These are complex, massive societies and empires that existed, but nobody's fucking heard about them because we don't tell their stories, right? And I think that things like Moana are extremely useful in giving people that empathy and understanding toward that culture, right? Things like Coco, right, gave really good insight, like honest insight into like Mexican culture, Mexican tradition, right? That most people just don't have because they don't interact with Mexicans, right? So I think we shouldn't give them a pass. We should say, hey, this is bullshit, and we need to start telling other people's stories.
Okay, layman, Wick.
Yeah, so I think I'm kind of getting to an answer of the question that I asked earlier. I don't really think it was answered directly, but I think we're kind of getting somewhere. So again, like, I want to know how you determine when something is for woke points and when something is just they hired a black guy because they were.
I think there's some indications. So I can tell you.
So
go ahead.
Hold on.
I
think we're getting somewhere. I just wanted to say that we're getting somewhere. Okay, I wasn't trying to shit on anybody. Just think we're getting somewhere. So it seems like everyone kind of agrees that, like, maybe not everyone does agree. Everyone kind of agrees that, like, the furthest on the woke side is like the Lady Ghostbusters movie, and then over here you've got like Into the Spider-Verse, where it was like, oh, this character was like created, an original character who just happens to be black, so like no reason to freak out about that, right? So it seems like the line for how we determine this is like somewhere in here, and I just kind of want to know where that line is, and I think we're kind of getting somewhere there. So,
well, I think there's
does
some
anyone know,
indications,
like,
right? So sometimes they'll tell you, right? They'll like be all over Twitter, but
Yeah.
while the movies are being made, and they'll tell you, right? Other times it's not that clear, right?
sorry, who was it?
I think
filmmakers will tell you. Or
yes,
they
they make it. Yeah, they make it a massive part of their media push, right? That
Is
hey,
that-
it's this is what happened with the female Ghostbusters movie. They were all
happened with
over the
Moana,
place pushing this.
It happened with Moana. All the movies that you described, they emphasize the importance of representation. So
Wait, hold on, but this is because with
That's
Moana, they were telling.
That's not a race swap. How the fuck
Yeah.
is Moana a race
no,
swap?
I'm just saying that like the same backlash came with those films for the exact same reason.
I don't
like,
think
we want
so.
Who the
at
fuck
all.
was doing a
Yeah.
backlash against Moana?
What back were there from Moana? They're
people
telling
on
a.
Twitter.
Can you name one person that's
Moana
like
got a lot of.
would
I
know?
just want to say Moana got a lot of critical.
Okay,
acclaim.
so why don't
Like,
we
a lot of
trade?
people-
I'll
One
give you-
YouTuber or anybody.
I'll give you that if you give me one director that overtly said that they did this race swap because of the race. Like, I'll give you that trade if you want.
So it's got to
Wait,
be a director. We can't just like
but
use
can I-
like
Just like
Yeah,
a
you use,
filmmaker
like,
or
writers,
writers,
like-
someone, some authority on the film. Like,
Yeah,
So while
some
you guys
authority on the film.
working that out, if I don't, I just would like to respond to it. Let me. So what I think is, so again, sometimes they'll tell you outright in the media when they're doing their media push. Other times, it's like there's like so I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna give a spoiler for a 4-year-old movie. Okay, the Avengers Endgame, where they had all the female superheroes suddenly, for some fucking reason, throw in the same place at the same time to help Spider-Man, and so that was embarrassing, right?
It's so weird.
So rather than treat them as like every other superhero that's on that battlefield fighting with everybody else, right? They need to make a point of these are women and they're superheroes and they're working together to save this boy, right? Like it's that when they do shit like that, I think it becomes pretty obvious why they're doing this, right? It's pretty embarrassing.
There was like the one scene where they all landed and like they got just this whole like a screenshot of them, standing there
Yeah.
like, hey guys, you want this movie? We can make this movie for you if you wanted.
And in the story, most of these people would have no idea who any of these other fucking people are, but they're all in the same place for some reason at this time to help Spider-Man. It's fucking embarrassing. And it's clear when they do stuff like that they're doing it for a pretty specific reason.
Let's go to Wick. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a we have to understand a pretty recent phenomenon. If we pull the lens back, actually Hollywood has had the opposite problem for most of its existence, where minority roles would be played by white
Sure.
actors, just using makeup and things like that to play their roles, and that obviously was offensive. It created problems. It kept minorities out of paid jobs at these places. It just wasn't good. So even when the character was traditionally Asian or black or what have you, or a woman, they would be played by white actors, right? If you go back even further to plays and things like that, again, uh, women's roles were played by men in a lot of cases, dressed up as women to play their roles. So this adjustment we're seeing, in some cases, an over adjustment we're seeing, is a very recent phenomenon.
Do you think
And
it's
I
a
will
blacklash?
Hmm?
Would you call it a blacklash?
No, I would not. But I think that it comes from a very real desire to give minorities more of a place in our culture, more of a place in roles and paid roles, and that's a good thing, right? But we all understand that it could go too far and things like that. I think we've given examples of this, right? And to answer Layman's question, maybe just a little bit, like one of the things that you can kind of um, it is how it's marketed and how it's told about. And when someone wants to tell me about a story, when someone wants to sell me on a story, one of the selling points isn't we have a bunch of white people or we have a bunch of women or we have a bunch of minorities. If that's one of the selling points of the movie, I'm going to be suspicious of the quality of the product just because they're not advertising the quality of their product and the story itself. It's not a life-changing story that evokes emotion. Instead, it's we have a bunch of X, Y, or Z in there, and
Yeah,
that's
so you
one of
rate
the
it
reasons
based
why.
off of like the quality of the writing in comparison to the focus on like diversity and stuff, right?
Yes.
That's how you measure it? Okay, fair enough.
Uh,
I think you would have to like see the movie first because a lot of people
Yes and
usually
no.
have
I
those
mean, there's a
visceral
lot of
reactions beforehand,
look.
but
There's a
I
lot of
agree with you.
times where you can look at a preview of a movie and decide, like, okay, maybe, you know,
Yeah, because sometimes movies look like they're written like shit, right? Like when I saw the trailer for that
I mean,
Ghostbusters movie in 2016, I was like, that looks horrendously unfunny.
I mean,
Like,
sort of Star
and I
Wars
thought
and
everybody,
Finn.
including the men, were unfunny in that. So.
I mean, we can talk about the Star Wars trailer where it was just a stormtrooper taking off their helmet and all of right Twitter lost their shit. Like,
Oh, I don't pay attention to.
that's
I
a
mean,
ha-
I don't know.
that
Like, I
absolutely
mean,
happened.
I mean, I wasn't keyed into right Twitter because like I just made a Twitter like 2 months ago because like apparently I fucking have to as a Twitch streamer. But like from everyone that I saw from like right wing content creators about Star Wars and shit, they were super excited. I think what was the most disappointing was the fact that
stormtroopers are white.
okay,
Well, it's because the
okay,
quartering
the
doesn't know the
quartering-
fucking lore, and he
Yeah,
thinks
I
that
mean,
they're
like,
the clone. The
Argon's a
he
stormtroopers
probably
are
thinks that they're
clones.
fucking clones.
He
thinks
And
they're clones.
also the
And
clone,
that clone was brown, by the way.
also that clone is
Yeah.
Maori. Is
Yeah.
like,
Goalposts.
but regardless, you know, everyone that I saw was excited to see like a possible stormtrooper turned Jedi arc. And instead, what you had was the most useless fucking character ever, which was Finn. I mean, the only thing like
That
who
wasn't what
literally
we got from the trailer, though. It wasn't explicitly in the first trailer that Finn was going to go down that arc.
I know, but a bunch of people were excited, hoping that's what was going to happen. And what they
Yeah,
got
I was
was the
aware.
Disney fucking Star Wars films, which were utter fucking trash. And the only thing Disney fucking, I mean, like, look at Disney Star Wars. It's woke as fuck. And that's part of the
I don't
reason why the
understand your
writing's
point.
so trash.
Are you saying that if people were excited that potentially Finn would go down the route of being a Jedi? Like,
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah,
ton of
I mean,
people.
hold on. So I was very
from
like,
the-
hold on. I'm like, I'm not gonna. I'm a Star Wars fan. Okay, I'm kind of
I'm
a Star
a
Wars
super
nerd.
big Star Wars nerd.
And-
Be careful talking about Star Wars.
There are tons of people who to the last fucking Jedi movie, they were convinced that somewhere in there, Rey was gonna go bad and Finn will be the Jedi and save the day, right? Because she was gonna go to the dark
Yeah.
side.
That's
That was
not
the
what I'm
storyline
talking
people were
about,
hoping was gonna have.
That's not what
Yeah,
I'm talking
but-
about, though. I'm talking about the first initial trailer of the reboot when the stormtrooper took off his helmet. You see a black guy,
Yeah.
John Boyega, and people lost their shit. That's what I'm talking
like I
about.
said, like I
I'm
said
not
earlier, I think
talking about
there's
Those people.
the totality of
I get, yeah,
all
sure,
three
I'm sure that
films
exists.
is a different conversation.
Right, but this isn't a race swap. What you just gave is an example of
They
some
overtly
people.
thought it was a race swap. That
Right,
there were
but
race
you
swap
gave
Well,
an
these
example.
are the kind of
You
people
gave
that
an
would be upset
example
over
of a
Miles Morales.
minority.
We had a panel
They're ignorant.
about it.
But
Like,
you
no,
gave
no,
you gave an
well, we're afraid
example.
they're not here,
You gave an example of a minority of people that don't understand the lore being mad. And I think the issue here is that a lot of people especially on the right, like white people on the right? I think they feel like beat dogs because over and over and over again, their media like has this weird thing where like they're constantly having to stop breathing so goddamn loud, whoever that is.
That's Prime.
Yeah,
Right,
I'm
Yeah,
laughing
your breath got
out
real loud for
loud.
there a second.
It's really
right, well,
funny, but keep going
No,
because it's
but,
really
like
cool.
they feel. I think a lot of them feel like beat dogs because it's like they get excited about a franchise, and then there's like this inevitable like woke push about it, and they feel like they're afraid that whatever media that they're in love with is going to turn into like some woke shit. Like there's people that are big Star Wars fans, and now they're like, okay, I can't look at the Disney fan fiction.
Was it bad
Okay,
because it was woke? I thought it was just bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't-
So
yeah,
hold on,
that's
so
what
hold
I'm-
on,
that's
so
kind of
hold
what
on.
I'm push-
I got
so
to let Top
confused.
Dolphin in, and then I'm bursting to go next. But because holy shit, oh my god, Top Dolphin, please.
Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
that's actually what I was gonna bring up next. Is that like, I don't think, and maybe people disagree. I don't think it's necessarily bad that like things are woke, right? If somebody wants to make an all-female movie because wokeness, that's not necessarily the bad part. The bad part is when they make bad art in the name of wokeness, right? And so like a lot of times, like for example with the Star Wars thing, like there and like you can deny it if you want, like out of the hardcore Star Wars community, most people were doing. I'll admit most people were like, oh my god, there's like all these cool storylines. This is super exciting. But most people aren't hardcore fans. Most people are casuals when they consume shit. And when most people, and there's a lot of people, especially people on the right, who saw the John Bodega take his helmet off, and they were like, "Oh my god, they're woking Star Wars now, right?"
Yeah, but they're
And
fucking nerds, right? That are hyper, like Fabian said. They're a
no.
bunch of fucking nerds that are hyper-obsessed with,
In
like,
this case, actually, now
bullshit.
sometimes it's that way, but in this case, it wasn't the nerds who were like,
it was,
"Oh my god,
people
fuck."
who weren't nerds.
It was the nerds were the people like I think it was Fabian. I don't remember who said it.
I'm going
who
off
were-
of the example Joe Lewis gave of the quartering because the quartering's a fucking nerd.
Well,
and kind
that
of-
guy- no, that guy's
I
an
know,
idiot.
I
That's
know.
what
So-
I'm
he might be a nerd, but
I
he's
can
also
think of,
like a racist.
multiple
So.
other cool
That guy's
guys.
a fucking clown.
There's multiple other cool guys that we could cite here for this. Like Top Dolphin's not out of pocket here.
You think
But hold on,
Yeah.
but like I said earlier, I think there is a knee-jerk reaction, right? That Top Dolphin pointed to earlier, with like Miles Morales, where people hear Black Spider-Man and they assume, oh, this must be woke, but actually, it's just within the story, it totally makes fucking sense.
Okay,
Wait, Dolphin,
we
isn't that
got
your
to
point, though?
focus in on. Hold on, first we got to get Top Dolphin. then I
Yeah,
gotta go
my
because
point
I'm
is,
bursting.
my point is kind of that like if they want like let's say like a group of writers got together, like fantastic writers, and we're like, oh my god, we want to make like an all women's something because wokeness, right? And they make the all women's thing, and because wokeness, and it's like fucking phenomenal. I don't think anybody would say this is like a bad piece of art necessarily.
Like
What happens
Cinderella?
is you
Oh,
get
sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, sorry. But what happens is a lot of times the art that we get out of wokeness, a lot of times they'll like push this wokeness over making good art. And
Yes.
so my biggest criticism is that like we should be like first and foremost judging the art on its own rather than trying to make leaps about like, oh my god, they're doing this for wokeness. And I can like I said earlier in my opening statement, I can kind of empathize with, hey, in the past they've done the wokeness thing and ruined some things, right? But the wokeness thing in itself isn't bad, and like that's why people shouldn't be as outraged about it, I think.
Okay, all right. So I'm just I gotta jump in because you guys have been driving me fucking crazy, especially Scott. But like, I guess there's nothing new about that.
Yeah, it's what happens when I'm right.
all right. So many things, right?
Sorry, right wing.
So many things, right? Some of those things is that like even going back to the historical example you brought up with the Anne Boleyn thing, right? So if this sounds like vaguely familiar, but like I don't really remember this movie happening, but like it's vaguely familiar that was a change, right? But there actually can be a value in doing that, right? So like going back to what Layman said, like way at the very start, Layman talked about doing a slavery story. It's like, he said, well, obviously you have to have, black people as the slaves and white people as the slave masters. And is that so obvious? Like,
Well,
what
I
if
mean,
we,
there were
what
some
if,
black slave owners.
what if, that's true.
Well, yeah,
But
you
what
could
if,
tell
that's
that Django
like
and James, for
I wanna hear
example,
Prime's
they
right.
represented
what if we reversed the races there, right? What if we reversed the races? I think there'd be a
Ursula Le Guin,
lot of
Ursula.
Oh, you mean?
I
I know what you mean. You mean like an original movie where you have like black people enslave white people and to make like some kind of like social commentary or something
Just
like
tell
that?
the story of the Slavic people.
You
I mean,
could
we
tell.
got that
Oh, that's
already.
another thing you could do,
too.
You
You
could have
We could just tell the story of the Barbary Wars.
I mean, we
Yeah,
already-
yeah,
That's what I was
I
gonna
mean,
say. I was gonna get
Well,
into that too.
Oh my god,
Oh,
no,
we should,
I'm
yeah.
talking.
Okay.
But you can tell literally the exact story of the American South, and switch the races, and to make a point, because of what Scott said, because Scott said one thing interesting previously, right? He said that after a while, right? After a
More than
while,
you'll ever say on the panel.
Oh boy, I love you, Scott. After a while, people like stop paying attention, right? Like, you've seen so many fucking slavery stories, like, and it's not just white people who stop paying attention, right? Black people stop paying attention to that shit too. You've seen a bunch of slavery stories, but like the contrast, the switch will actually have an effect, right? So here's a race. Well,
Can we
okay,
can we try not to be a writer's room, because you're coming up with bad movie ideas?
Oh my
He's a
god,
moderator. He can do whatever he wants.
yeah, do whatever I want.
Move by the Barbary Wars.
But okay, here's an example, right? From what's it called? The Hunger Games, right? There was a character there, right? Lucky Rue. I think that her name was Rue. No, Lucky, not the Rue, but just Rue. Rue, who was a little girl, and she dies early in the books, right? Like, just like super early, she dies. It's super sad, right? Supposed to bring you in, right? There was a segment of online people saying that, like, I couldn't get into this. I couldn't like feel anything because they had this little black girl die. I don't even shit about that, right? Like, people were actually saying that, like, the fact that it was a black person who died, I like, makes me like not give a shit. And why did they recast it as black? Like, this girl was white the entire time, except that she wasn't. She was actually black in the books. They just literally like excised that from their minds. But like, it works the same. So you guys were talking about the stormtrooper that Eucharist brought, or not Eucharist, one of you guys brought up, maybe Joe Lewis.
Joe Lewis brought up the stormtrooper, I believe.
Yeah. But one of you guys
Finn.
brought it up.
Okay.
But you guys, you brought up saying that, well, they didn't know the lore, but that doesn't matter. It's actually immaterial whether they know the lore or not, whether they're wrong about it or not. It's perceived to be a race swap, right? And so they lose their fucking minds about it. About this fictional story of a galaxy far, far away, right? Like, those people were saying
that's literally what I was referencing.
When he took off the stormtrooper, I remember at that point, and I remember the conversations, and there were people who said, "Oh, well, the stormtroopers and the whole empire is based off the Nazis, right? And Nazis only had white people in it." It's like, you almost
So they don't know Star Wars lore.
Yeah, I know they don't. I'm
Top
agreeing
Dolphin's
with
point.
you. But hold on, yeah. So like, they don't.
That was
they didn't,
my
I
point.
don't understand
You
that.
guys
like,
are circling
yes, it's a
to make my
God,
point differently.
Shut up!
Come on, Scott.
Well, make a fucking point, PrimeCayes.
Shut the fuck
He's a
up!
moderator. He can do what he wants.
Shut the fuck up! I'll talk
Just
as long as
make
I
a
fucking
point.
want. Holy shit! Shut up! Thank you. Anyway, they didn't seem to understand that the Empire is based off like a fascist group, right? A fascist empire, but like, that's not where the fascism came from. It came off of like humans, right? It was only humans rather than like white people. But that's what they intuited, right? And so they reacted that way. So I think that it's fair to say, like, this idea of like wokeness that like Scott keeps bringing up, right? It just becomes anything that I don't like, right? Like, the moment that I see these people being recasted, I react in some way, and then like that becomes the woke mob, right? And then, like, regardless of writing or casting or anything else, right? Then it becomes a problem. Wokeness gets replaced with anything I don't like. There you go.
I think there are
you just
people-
Gish galloped no points. But let me just.
Bro, I have a
let me just-
question about what
like,
you
it's so silly.
said.
Okay, Joe Lewis, and then you, Chris.
Or I guess like something I'm observing, because Top Dolphin kind of alluded to it too. Like, and I hate to go down this route because like Oh God, I can hear like the ghost of Vivian and Wolf in the back of my head. Fucking. But it's like, isn't the critique in this just capitalism? Like, if we understand that like anything is going to get commodified, in this case, diversity is just getting commodified as a means to sell tickets. Now, granted, like you'd have to have like a higher burden of proof of that, right? But like for fuck's sake, like anytime Marvel does that sort of fan service of femme fatales having their scenes, which like if you haven't seen or paid attention, they do this all the time. It wasn't just an Endgame. They always have these scenes where certain underrepresented individuals have their fight scene. Avatar did it too. Star Wars did it too. There's just like a sea of examples, ironically all from Disney, but that might be a whole other thing. But like it's just another thing that's getting commodified. And like I guess if you have a problem with that, then I guess you have a problem with capitalism. But I guess people don't. Again, like people probably don't want to go that far. I mean, you can say that it's dumb, but you know, like truth hurts. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I think you can believe in,
you're
like,
calling the
okay.
current economic system capitalist, right? Which
I'm
it
so-
barely
okay,
is.
So why
And
don't I
then-
modify my point so like you can engage with the argument without
Please not
scalping
a-
for 5 hours. Anything can be commodified, and in this case, diversity is being commodified. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, but also
Okay, cool.
people's
Then we're
dislike
done.
people's dislike of it is part of capitalism too. That's the whole point of like get woke, go broke. That's why a lot of these woke things end up failing. Some of them do all right, and the ones that do all right tend to be fine that just happen to have some woke shit in it, and it's tolerable.
So
and the
we-
ones that are purely fucking woke, like
what is woke
the
shit to you?
Ghostbusters
Define
film.
that.
No, but
was
it doesn't
fucking
matter. But it doesn't matter
bomb.
to you then. It doesn't matter to you then because if wokeness is commodifiable, it's just going to get commodified. And then the question would become like, okay, well, what do we do about it? Like we try to fight with our dollar. You see conservatives say that all the time of like cancel your subscriptions, like cancel your Disney. It's like they're not going to do that. Like because the machine of content is too strong for a lot of people to just go like, oh, I'm going to cancel my Disney Plus subscription. Oh, I'm going to cancel my Netflix subscription. Like they're not going to do that. And then there's going to be somebody who brings up like, oh, well, the Netflix subscriptions are going down, but then ignore the fact that we're fucking sanctioning the shit out of a really large country that has a lot of people who use Netflix. But that's a whole other thing. But I don't know. It just like, we agree that it can be commodified. And then I guess the next step will be like, if you agree that anything can be commodified.
Eucharist,
Okay,
Wick,
but what's the point there?
Eucharist, Wick, Pyro.
Yeah, I don't understand what the point is. Like,
So-
yeah, everything.
Oh, sorry, Eucharist, Wick,
Because-
Pyro.
Let me
Joe
agree.
haven't made any points.
Let me agree with
I
Prime
made
on
a
it.
point. I made a point. and
He's just saying that you made no point. So just say that,
I'm
like
just
to
gonna-
ignore you,
I'm just
whatever.
gonna-
It's fine. Eucharist.
Okay, let me agree with Prime on a point in the sense that there are, I think, good examples. I'm actually struggling to come up with some right now, but somebody else can tell me. I think there are good examples of like reimaginings of classic stories or even historical stories. I think you can do good art that way, right? I mean, like Disney does this all the time, right? The Lion King is just Hamlet, right? You can take a story and transform it and make it something different. Obviously, that's not like a race thing, but it's just like, you can do adaptations and interpretations and transformations of stories in cool ways that can bring in people of other races into that. And I think one of the reasons that works is these are frequently things that are more informed by like stage techniques than they are traditional film techniques. Again, like theater involves a lot more suspension of disbelief, right? When you live in a world where like a bunch of prestige dramas are just being done over and over and over again, it's really hard to just like gatekeep a role to a race, right? Good actors are going to get good roles, and you can do good art with people of any race and in all these stories, right? It's possible. So like, this is why I said like, I don't think like my idea about like, maybe shouldn't be distracting. The story should still come first. Like, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's not like, oh, we can't ever have a black actor in this role, the kind of thing. I think that's silly. But I want to go back to one of the questions that Prime posed as part of this main thing is like, basically, when is like outrage justified? Like, when are people justified in being resentful about this stuff? You guys are talking about controversy about things like Moana. I think the list that Doobie gave of Moana, Coco, and the most Encanto is interesting because each of those has had its own like backlash from both directions, right? Oh, also Raya and the Last Dragon. So Moana had some conservative critics in like National Review and some other places basically saying she was too thick, like teaching girls that Disney princesses don't have to be fit or something stupid like that. But then there was some backlash that came from like a costume that they came out with when the movie released of Maui, like a brown skin suit with tattoos. Same thing with Raya and the Last Dragon. There was some controversy about them kind of blending and mishmashing Southeast Asian cultures and casting mostly East Asian voice actors rather than Southeast Asian voice actors. Same thing with Coco. There was some controversy early on about how they were using Dia de los Muertos and trying to copyright it and some other things, and then some conservative backlash about all they're making now is these ethnic movies. Where are my white movies, right? There's controversy from both sides. So I'm just wondering, when do you guys feel that like backlash and resentment is justified in any of these cases from either direction, like from the left or the right? I don't know if we've talked about that at all. I'd be interested to.
Sure.
So
Let's
I
go
think
to
it
Wick.
makes-
Let's go to Wick. Let's give Wick a chance. Yeah, man.
Sure. When it comes to how you feel about something, it's very hard for me to say your feelings are wrong, right? So if you feel like you aren't being represented for whatever reason, whatever race you are, that your IP that you love is somehow being lessened because of a design choice made by the producer and things like that, you could feel that way, right? The question is, what is reasonable here? What should a reasonable people feel and things like that? I think anyone who gets super mad or upset because they had a black person in a Norse role in a Marvel movie, right? Come on, it's comic
I
book,
don't
okay, right?
I don't buy this whatsoever. It's not because if it were a white guy taking the place of a black person, you wouldn't say, "Oh, it's comic books." Like, you would say, "Hey, that's not cool. That it's a white man taking over a black role."
I mean, that
this
happens.
isn't
Happens with
equal-
Egypt all the time.
Yeah,
and people
I mean,
accuse
like,
us
what
of
are you
like
talking about?
whitewashing
This
because
isn't
we have
equal
people
and
that actually are
opposite.
historically
No,
accurate.
The problem is that
right?
it's
Like,
not equal.
you don't even have to
because
whitewash.
we have
You can
we
just
come in the
put white
country, we
people
come
in
we
appropriate
come in a
historical
cultural
categories.
context where white people of color have been locked out of Hollywood, have been traditionally locked out, still locked out in many different ways. So people don't get a chance. So taking roles, right, from minorities, yeah, that's not actually the same. It's not equal and opposite when this happens. It's
And I think that,
hold on.
look,
I think
just to finish my
go ahead.
point, just if I could finish my point, then you can address it. So to finish my point, so to address what you just said, Doobie, this does happen. I forget the exact name of the movie. Brad Pitt starred in it. It was set in Asia. It was called The Wall or something, right?
Yes,
Where
Matt
it was a
Damon.
bunch of like dinosaurs or
Damon.
something attacking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Matt Damon, the only white guy, was the main character and things like that.
And not to
and-
cut you off,
Wait,
Death of
that's not
Certainty,
true.
but like to clarify, they overtly casted Matt Damon to cater to an American audience. So I don't
Sure,
know
yeah, no,
where you
I
wanna
get your
go
point
with
about
that.
commodification. And I guess when I personally get kind of frustrated at Hollywood or any story is when they value this performative aesthetic over the actual story itself. You can cast whoever you like in whatever role you like. If the story is good, if it hits well, if it gets those beats and it's unique and interesting, I'll love it, right? But when we talk about prejudging things, some of the signals I've seen based on past experience is when the main selling point of your show or movie is look at all the diversity. I worry about the actual quality of the product. That is all.
Okay, so really quick, we was pointing about The Wall. That movie was specifically, it was a terrible movie, by the way, but it's specifically about European mercenaries who traveled to China, right, and stumbled upon fucking dragons and shit, right? Most
Yeah,
of
they
the people,
wrote they wrote
so,
the European they wrote
please,
the Europeans in.
they
Like,
wrote the
the
European
director said
mercenaries.
that.
Okay, maybe you can, maybe that's true, right? That's fine, right? But to say that, hey, this was like white people, or because, and there was like a Spanish in there, Pedro Pascal or whatever was in that movie too, right? So a white and a brown person took the place of nobody because this was a story specifically made for this purpose, right? I don't think it makes
Well, I
any
mean,
sense to bring this up as a
well,
case of
no,
where
but I mean,
you know
like,
white
that's
people are
something
taking
that
black roles or Asian roles or
no,
whatever.
I'm saying
Because
that's
that's not what
something that
happened here.
wouldn't
This
you
is
wouldn't
specifically about European mercenaries going to China.
sure, but wouldn't you be like, isn't that you wouldn't say that's bizarre that a Chinese
That
film in
European
order to
mercenaries go to
cater
China?
No. You're missing my point here. Is that a Chinese film wrote Europeans in to cater to an American audience.
It wasn't just a Chinese film. It was a
That's
Chinese.
your argument. That's your
It was
argument.
a no,
That's
please. It was
wokeness.
a
That's wokeness.
It was a Chinese and American co-production, right? This wasn't just a Chinese studio sticking a white guy in there to cater to
you're
Europeans.
dodging the point, and I get it.
I'm not dodging the
hold
point at
on,
all.
Isn't
I
that
think
the
I'm being
problem,
very
what you're
direct here,
describing?
right? So
but
that's
you're
not. Wait, please.
dodging-
But
you're
again,
dodging what I'm saying.
I'm
here,
not
and
dodging
that's cool.
anything. You keep
Like,
saying that, right?
no,
That's fine. You
like,
can keep
okay,
interrupting
okay,
because you don't want me to
okay,
actually
alright.
address the point that
No,
you're saying
no,
that I'm
no,
dodging.
you just
Right, but
okay,
I'd
go
like to
for it.
address the
Go
point
for
if you
it.
just stop
Yeah, go
interrupting.
ahead, DB.
So-
I see Pyro. We were gonna go to Pyro as well. DB,
Okay.
please.
So again, the issue isn't a white person being in the film or a black person being in the film or whatever, right? It's when there are specifically white characters or black and brown characters that are replaced by some other ethnicity or some other race for the reasons of wokeness or whatever, right? You're not going to see this with white people these days, right? But that's what we're talking about here. It's not just that a white person is in a movie that is like predominantly
narrow.
like Chinese. No, that's exactly what we're talking about. So
we get
That's the
upset
topic.
and we get
I
angry.
don't get. I don't understand why.
Please stop.
Oh,
Stop. Wait,
man.
really quick.
Let him finish.
keep going.
She has
Earlier you said, hey, this is if a black person's in a Marvel movie, well, and they're taking like a Norse role or whatever, like a white role, who cares? It's just Marvel. Well, that's kind of silly because these characters.
Quick correction: it's Vikings Valhalla.
Thank you. So these characters mean a lot to people, right? And if you're somebody who, what was the character's name? Idris Elba played him, the guy with the golden eyes.
The Dark Towers series, yeah.
No. Well, that's a good,
you
that's a good
mean
one too.
the
Heimdall.
Sorry.
Heimdall.
The other race swap.
Yeah, the other white role he
In
took.
Marvel, we're talking about Heimdall. If you're talking about
Heimdall,
Idris
yeah,
Elba,
Heimdall.
it's the motherfucker with the gate, and he's
Yeah.
dripped out.
My
in
bad.
And
it.
he looked bad as
I
fucking.
got them
right?
multiple
But-
times. We race swapped him.
Yeah, and I really liked him as that character, by the way. But I could understand, right? So if somebody liked that character, followed them through the comics, and suddenly it's a black guy playing this character, they'd feel kind of cheated because they feel like this character's being twisted somehow to fit a narrative, right? Because
We
there's no
didn't get
good
the
reason.
white person saying
Please,
4 roles
There's
throughout
no
10 years.
wait 1 second. There's no good reason. There's no good reason for Heimdall to be black. Let's just be clear. Secondly, the same with the gunslinger, right? The gunslinger, that character in the book is specifically supposed to be like a fucking Clint Eastwood knockoff, right?
Well, also, you literally can't race swap that character because there's another character in the book that says horrible racist shit about him because he's white. So like you literally have to rewrite parts of the story to race swap them.
Exactly.
But they're like, we got to do it. It's just fucking stupid.
Wait, but
So
you,
it's that,
you
right?
rewrite parts of stories every time you do like an adaptation of anything, right?
That was
Okay,
my
but
point.
because
in
it's a
cases-
race doesn't
But in
matter.
cases
Man,
where it
like-
doesn't make any sense, there's no good reason.
just-
They
so
they rewrite stories,
so
right?
help me.
When
So
it's
help
not
me
when it's not good for a movie or whatever, maybe it's too complex, so they need to simplify it a little bit, or they can't include everything, so they leave out certain stuff and they imply it rather than show it. Shit like that makes sense, right?
Well,
But
I-
if
look,
I'm sorry, hold on.
or in the case of
Whoa. Finish your point, Doobie. Then I gotta go to. Let Joe Lewis
Sure.
respond, and then Pyro.
Or in the case of It, where in the book, there's like a whole underage orgy that happens. You're not going to show that on the screen, so instead it's like a friendship hug thing, right? So that those kind of adaptations make sense. But when you're just swapping the race of a character for and it adds nothing to the story whatsoever, and it actually reduces or removes chunks of the story that are totally relevant to the stories that are being told, that's when it makes no sense, and that's why people get upset.
Okay, go ahead, Joe Lewis. You respond. Then we're gonna.
I'm just so confused how like American this is why the Great Wall thing confused me so much, because these were American writers who overtly wrote in European characters to cater to an American audience. And I don't know, like that. I thought that was the thing that I thought that was like the thing that we're not supposed to be doing. I don't know. And then like we're making
culture.
Well, how do you know that was
stories.
racial?
Right?
You know that was racial.
That's the point. It's like nobody gave a fuck that like
I was
Salem. Nobody
asking
gave
him.
a fuck
What are you
that
asking,
Freeform-
Layman?
I was asking him. I was asking him.
Nobody gave a fuck that
I'm
Freeform
sorry.
made Salem.
I want
shit.
Joe Lewis
there's
to
a
answer.
race swap
But I
happening.
still-
I don't know. Am I Scott now?
Layman, you had a question for Joe
Well, you're
Lewis. You said,
potentially
how do
pretending
we
to
know
be
it's
Trump.
racial, right?
I
Go ahead,
was
Joe
just
Lewis.
asking Joe Lewis how.
What's
Yeah.
up,
So like, how do you know that they were writing that in like a racialized way? I guess.
I'm
That's
not
just
saying
a
they're writing it in a
genuine question,
racialized
not
way.
asking
When I'm
rhetorically or anything.
right, what I'm saying is, American writers overtly said that they wrote Matt Damon's character and also Pasquale's character to cater to an American audience.
Because
And I thought that was the thing that we're not supposed to be doing. Like
that
we're not
because
supposed to
they're
be
white?
just.
Or is it because like Matt?
hold
No,
on,
that
hold
is the
on,
thing we're saying that people should do. We're saying, hey, we
But we
want you to
should,
make
so
But it
characters.
also made 5 times more money in China than it did
We,
domestically.
we
which
want
I
we
think
want
is
you to make brand new
hilarious.
Yeah,
characters,
that's
brand
another
new
thing, too.
stories to cater to black audiences, and not
Well,
shoehorn
Eucharist-
black people into white stories. Like, why is it so
Eucharist,
complicated?
that's something interesting too, right? Where it's like, would they be able to make that same amount of money internationally if they didn't put Damon or Pasquale, or even make that writing decision?
Probably
It's
not,
kind of
'cause
hard to
Damon's a
say
huge actor,
because
right?
even
So-
with but then like also too contextually, like the Great Wall was at a weird point in films, right? Because it was like right before we kind of, it sounds so weird to say, but it was like right before we're like, okay, we can like have interesting stories and keep casts as they are and write the stories as it is. Because like, for example, like not every film is going to be like a Crazy Rich Asians where you can just like go deep into the diaspora and just tell the story as it is, despite the fact that it's pretty much like a story that's already been told before.
Well, yeah.
Let's
Speaking
go,
of that,
let's go to Pyro.
Yeah.
And then Eucharist, if you want, and wait.
So like I want to do two things. Like I want to answer Layman's early question because like I heard things from both sides that I kind of agree with. Like where is the line for me personally? Like when it comes to like this diversity thing being a bit of a problem, I will kind of agree when we're doing like strictly historicals and it's like, oh, there's no sci-fi aliens, there's no bullshit. Like, yeah, I would like to see the stories because it's fucking history and like it's a way that people are trying to
wanna
like bring it to the forefront. Yeah. To the second point, which is like where I'm kind of supporting Joe here when it comes to the Great Wall, even though it's a sci-fi story, I feel like earlier on in the conversation, Scott, Doobie, a lot of the people that are against this woke diversification of things, we're talking about how, hey, we would like to see more stories focusing on other cultures and shit. We would like to see more stories where like, yo, they're not just like shoehorning people in for dumb reasons. And then what Joe is describing is a movie that takes place in ancient China where, for all intents and purposes, it could have been just Chinese people fighting dinosaurs on the Great Wall of China. But if Joe's correct, the directors intentionally put in two characters to appeal to an American audience. I can understand where he's kind of confused, like, wait, this is a story where
He's
it
not
would,
confused.
But that's why I'm
could be
asking.
beneficial to where
Yeah.
It's
it's
your
not
stop-
confusing.
stop
But here's the
pretending.
thing,
Here we go.
though. It's fantasy.
You too, friend.
It's actually though fantasy, and this is the thing that Pyro said at the very start, right? Like, we can be in fantasy. Black people can be in fantasy. Like
Nobody
you're
says
saying
black
that
people can't be
for
in
that
fantasy.
for that wall thing of the Chinese. It was the Great Wall of China
The Wall,
movie,
yeah.
right?
The Wall.
Was it called The Wall? All right, wow. They're not very
Yeah,
the
it was
Great,
a
the
shit
Great
movie.
Wall, the Great Wall.
Okay, the
The
Great Wall. Right.
wall. It was the
It was
greatest
really
wall
bad.
ever.
The
It's
Great
biggest wall
Wall,
we've ever
right?
seen.
It was like they were fighting monsters, like fighting monsters. That shit never happened, right? Like and it was like magic and shit, right?
Allegedly.
Like the moment, like we like the moment that happens, we pulled out of reality, right? So what if there was like a diverse cast of individuals there, right? You have brown people, you have black people, right? And you have maybe Chinese people at the forefront fighting the monsters. It never fucking happened. None of it ever
No one
fucking
would
happened.
care.
Wait,
So what?
Prime,
So why?
but
Why
Prime,
you
but
worried
That's
about it?
because
It's the
you're
same thing that happened in Game of Thrones.
because you're
Game of
making up
Thrones, Game
bullshit
of Thrones,
to obfuscate
Game
from
of
what we're
Thrones,
talking about.
Game of
You're
Thrones did,
pretending.
the same thing, right? They're like, oh, there are black people in this story, right? The story about fucking dragons, right? And ice zombies, and that's not realistic because black people are there. We can imagine dragons
Game
all
of
the
Thrones
time
has an
flying through the sky,
established
but we can't
lore.
imagine a black princess. We can't.
Wait,
do
hold on,
that
but
here,
black
right?
people
Like,
exist.
let's
Black
talk-
people
let's talk-
And
let's
then-
talk-
and
wait,
then-
wait,
and
black
then
people-
finally, and then finally,
Podcast,
and then finally, and then
No,
finally,
why-
and finally,
and
shut
you're
up,
not making any
finally,
fucking
shut up,
points.
Shut up,
You're circling around the
Holy,
drain like an
shut the
idiot.
fuck up, Scott. Holy shit. Don't interrupt me. Shut the
Make
fuck
a
up.
fucking above room
Holy shit.
temperature.
Fu-
You
Shut
listen
the
to hear a
fuck up,
point.
Scott, right? Like, I'm fucking talking. You're fucking listening. That's how that fucking works, right? So shut the fuck up when I'm fucking talking. Fuck you. Any which way. The point I was trying to make is that but even in like and people even still make that mistake that like black people didn't exist in Europe, but they actually did. They were there the entire time. They were interacting. The cultures interacted. So they're saying like well, black people weren't in historical Europe, so none of this makes sense. It actually does make sense. So we were actually part of that that conversation too. And you again, it's like a perceived race swap, right? Saying that, wow, how could you include black people in all this when they weren't part of Europe? you were wrong. You're wrong to begin with. And then finally, when it comes to Game of Thrones, it's a fantasy world. It's not actually medieval Europe to begin with. So again, you're wrong, but the reaction is the same. Once it's a perceived race swap, right? Regardless of the content, people lose their fucking shit. Actually engaging with the story, engaging with the plot, engaging with the fucking characters. DB, you want to say something? And then Pyro, and then
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the thing that's really important that is this isn't Europe, right? So Game of Thrones is about a totally other like planet, right? And black people exist on this planet in another continent, right? Just like Asians exist in this in this planet on another continent. So if an Asian showed up in Game of Thrones in Westeros, it would just mean, hey, they traveled from that other continent to this place, and so long as it makes sense to the story, who gives a fuck, right? So like, people
are
in
Europe,
upset,
though, right?
It's not Europe, it's Westeros.
Yeah, I
right?
know, but when it was the case, like when we are talking about stories in Europe, black people were in Europe, right?
Yeah, sure. Black people existed in Europe. Yeah, they traveled from Africa to Europe. I think what the Moors were all over fucking Spain, right? Yeah, this is a thing that happened. But with like Game of Thrones specifically, we're not talking about Europe, and people who get upset because it's like they speak about it as if it's like a European story are just fucking stupid, right? And like I said earlier, there are these people that have these knee-jerk reactions, right? Who are fucking idiots. That I think we should, when those people pop up, dismiss them. They're stupid, right? People get upset about.
But my point is the same thing happens like when we're talking about like historical fiction, right? People are saying that well, black people didn't exist in Europe. That's like ahistorical, but they literally don't know. They don't know.
Well, no.
They're being go ahead.
Okay, I'm sure some of that exists. I think I've seen some of that actually. But I think what Fabian was referring to earlier with like Anne Boleyn is when they've taken someone in history who's white and they make this person black. Right. And this serves the story like 0%. There's no reason for this person to be black. This isn't what happened historically. I don't know what representation they're trying to shove into this. This is a European tale. If you want to give representation or tell a black story, tell a black story. There are plenty of amazing black stories out there. Right. So I think that's when people get upset. And I think when people get upset, it's totally legitimate to be upset about that. Just to be legitimate, if a story about fucking Nancy came out, right, and he's a white guy in Africa, I think people would be pretty upset about that, and it'd be totally reasonable for them to be upset.
So let's go to Pyro, Wick, Eucharist, Layman.
So my response to that, Doobie, is that like when shows like this are saying, "Yo, we're gonna do this," and like their dramas and shit, I can understand that this is like what we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
earlier.
PrimeCayes. Oh, sorry, you just unserved me.
Yeah, so like when we're talking about these retellings and these reinterpretations, I can live with that. I can watch that and be like, oh, this is a really good interpretation. My thing is, and like maybe this is where Doobie's coming from, when you get those movies and shit that are like, we are 100% historically accurate, we're taking no liberties whatsoever, we did all of this research, look how many books we read, and then like they do some wild shit where it's like, oh, the king of Belgium wasn't black or some dumb shit like that. But like when we're talking about like the queen and shit like that, like I can understand like retellings and shit are useful, like they're interesting in showing like, yo, some shit's bad. It's not about the race. It's not about. It's just bad. Like when the queen has to make, when Anne Boleyn has to make these fucking decisions that the real Anne Boleyn made, is like, oh, I'm not worried that like, oh, her blackness is gonna change it. Like now, like you're gonna have to kind of play to that. Like you can't have her be like, yes, no, I'm gonna do something that Queen Boleyn would never do because she's black. Because then it diverts into fantasy. It's not like a historical drama.
Wait, so can I bring up something we haven't talked? So Hamilton, right? And this is the case where I think wokeness was done correct, right?
I mentioned Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Chris. I missed it. So yeah, Hamilton. I think they took all these white dudes, made them black and brown, whatever. There were still some white people in the play, but I think that's like if you want to talk about representation or telling like a quote unquote European white story, right, from through this lens, that's the perfect way to do it. Right, so they put this cultural twist on it, and represented the United States as it exists today. Very diverse cast telling an American story, right? I think if you're gonna do the wokeness thing and the swapping out white people for black people historically or whatever, that's the way to do it. But when you're just like, when you're doing what we referenced earlier, so you're shoehorning in like Achilles is a black dude, and it makes no fucking sense, or you're shoehorning in Anne Boleyn or whatever, or fucking or the gunman or the gunslinger from the Dark Tower series, who's Clint Eastwood basically, and suddenly he's black, and the story makes no sense because this other character that attacks him constantly in the book for being white now just can't exist anymore or can't make those insults. Like it just fucks up the entire narrative. And I think when people do that, I think we should call them out. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself. All I'm saying is I want less. If you're gonna have like black stories being told, if you want this representation, brown stories, do actual representation. Don't do this fucking brown washing of white stories. Put forward actual black and brown stories, actual diversity, like the real thing.
But you
Okay,
describe.
let's go to Wick. Let's go to Wick. Wick, he's
Sure,
been waiting
we'll
so
Yeah,
long.
so my point's almost been lost and we almost trampled over it, but we're going to go back to it because I want to, dang it. So one of the things that I push back against the tokenism, right? Like when you have a character that's whole sole purpose is I'm the white character, or I'm the gay character, or look, I'm the black character, and that is the sole like depth to their character. It's terrible. And when we talk about things like The Wall, or we talk about other things where they just write in characters of a certain race just because they need to have a certain race for whatever purpose, whether it's commodity or their audience or things like that, it's tokenism. It detracts from the story. It's unnecessary. And we would see the same thing if you had a story and a mythological story or a fantasy story, and the characters lack depth, and it's very obvious that the only reason that the character is there is because it's representation or diversity.
That's not a race swap.
It doesn't matter.
But
if
you
it's a race
can
swap
just
or not.
critique the character for being a bad
Yeah,
character.
like that's another
Like,
problem though. Like that's like, yo, that's a token character, my dude. Like stop it. That's not diversity. We're talking about like the race swapping of like maybe main characters and shit. I understand where you're coming from with like that is a problem, but like I don't think that's the discussion.
Most of the people here have not been talking about race swapping at all, especially PrimeCayes.
Yeah, we have. I'm sorry you haven't been listening, Scott. But
no, I've been listening. You're not actually talking about race swap. When you're bringing up characters that were designed like The Wall, right? That are designed a certain way, and there's no historical or there's no lore basis for them. That's not a race swap. That's just we picked this character based off of the story that we're writing. Nobody was upset when Freeform came out with Salem, despite it being women are like control the military because they're witches, and there's like LGBT representation at like 80% in the fucking show, and like some of the fucking writing is kind of bad, but at the end of the day it's just like teen girls and like slightly older women fucking people up with magic vocal cords. You know why nobody cared? Because there was no established lore, because they weren't changing races or changing gender identity or changing genders or changing hair colors of existing characters that people love. When you're talking about race swapping,
Fabian,
you're talking about
I can ask you a direct
love or live in the world, and then you change their race, and then you make some of your marketing about that, and you fucking your writers go on Twitter and be like, ha ha ha, it's a woman now, and it becomes this. It's an attack on culture, and it's an attack on stories, and the people that love these stories or are invested in this history feel like you're using politics to try and do something instead of just making fucking stories.
Oh God!
Clutch my pearls real quick.
I mean, PrimeCayes, I can literally say that on every other panel you do.
Yeah, I know. White people can't understand these things. Oh, so aggrieved. Oh wow!
He gives no fuck.
They're beating dogs.
I just want to know, like, are we gonna shift this over to fantasy? Because we talked about like historical shit for a minute now.
I got a question. I mean, I have a fantasy question. Wait, you, Chris, you can answer this too, because I think you know where I'm going with this. Scott, what are your thoughts on Cinderella? Whitney Houston's adaptation of Cinderella.
I don't know that I've seen it.
Okay.
There's a more recent one you could point to that was super well,
like the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where they like got rid of
Cinderella. Are you talking about Sneakerella?
The more recent Cinderella had a fairy godmother that was like a drag queen.
No. Disney Plus is doing Sneakerella.
Yeah, it was actually really good.
Sneakerella as well.
I don't know about that one.
Terrible.
I mean, Cinderella was a cultural phenomenon in the late 90s. It's
Okay.
surprising to me how you didn't hear about that, considering the entire cast was essentially race swapped. Like the prince was Asian, Brandy was Cinderella,
Yeah, I
Whitney
didn't see
Houston
it.
was the fairy godmother, and Whitney Houston overtly and dedicatedly insisted for this movie to happen and willed it into existence. She wanted to play
Okay.
Cinderella, but then they said that she was too old at 30, which is kind of wild. But
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen it. I can't really be. I can't.
Have you
really
seen
be
The
offended or have
Wiz?
an opinion.
Yes,
Have you seen The Wiz?
Oh
yeah,
god,
The Wiz.
Garbage movie. I wish I
When
hadn't
was,
seen
like,
it.
a kid.
It was a musical first, but sure. Like,
Yeah.
like, so I don't understand. Like, why is Hamilton okay, but The Wiz isn't?
Well,
Well,
never said
I
The
don't.
Wiz
I don't
wasn't
think The Wiz
okay.
isn't okay. Like I don't. Like I said, there's a more recent one you could give in Joe Lewis. It's actually Cinderella too, where I think Cinderella's played like Camilla Cabello. I can never remember her name. And
That was Snow
the
White.
fairy no, the Cinderella. The fairy godmother is like a drag queen black guy, right? I think it's a drag queen.
he's
He
a
wears
feminine guy.
dresses
He's
and
not a
he's
feminine
black.
guy.
He's not.
Wait,
He's
what
not.
do
I
you-
don't think he's trans.
What are you
Feminine
talking
black
about?
guy.
Yeah, it just came out like last year. It's actually really good. You know, they totally different spin on the story, and I liked it. Right, even it though it was woke, because I think they did it properly. Where the point of this is to do the swap, right, to make it
And-
about like a diverse story. But if
Sure.
you're hold on, but that's the thing though, right? So you can do this in a good way, right? Where it makes sense, where you're giving representation, telling the story of these groups, like Hamilton, like the new Cinderella, like maybe the Wiz or the old Cinderella. That I don't think I've seen the old Cinderella. But
It was a
when
hit,
you're
but, yeah.
when all you're
Look-
doing is reaching into a story, taking an established character that is white and sticking a black dude in there, that's when there's issues, right? I think that's when, and especially if within the lore or within the context of the lore and the character, it makes no sense. I.e., the new Little Mermaid that's apparently going to be a black girl, right? It's really fucking weird.
What?
Why,
Like,
wait, time out, time
Ginger
out,
erased
wait,
her.
wait,
Wait, what the
wait,
fuck?
time out.
You-
Hold on, Joe Lewis, hold on. Why is the new Little Mermaid weird because she's black?
The Little Mermaid
There's an
is
established lore.
yeah. The Little Mermaid
talking about
is hold on. The Little Mermaid is like a fucking European folktale, right? About a white girl with red hair, right? Or white
So we
mermaid
just
lady
talked
with
about
red hair.
retellings
So
of
if you were
other
Yes,
please,
yes.
with
We're talking about
please. So wait
retellings,
one
right?
second,
We're
please.
Mm.
No, well, 1 second. So if they're doing the thing that they did with Cinderella, right, where everybody's a different race, everybody's fucking excessively diverse, and it's kind of the point of the story to do this thing. Okay, fine, right? That might make sense if it's good. I might even like it. Like I like the new Cinderella, right? I thought the music was really good. But if all they were to do in that movie, right, is reach in and make Poseidon and the Little Mermaid black, right, and not
They're
do
not,
anything
but
else, so it's
yeah.
still set in a European place, right? That'd be fucking weird, right? It wouldn't make any sense within the context of the story.
But right,
If-
but,
if
but
we
again,
did a
like,
fucking
I think
movie
what
about-
sucks. I think what sucks about this is that like we don't even know what we're talking about with the Little Mermaid. Like there are like the cast has been announced for a significant amount of time. People were really upset when they announced Melissa McCarthy as Ursula because they were just like, oh no, they're just recasting because it's a fat white woman. Like that was
I
a
hate Melissa
Twitter
McCarthy.
discourse. Like
Well,
I
Melissa
don't know.
McCarthy is unfunny, and her entire thing is being a fat white woman. So yeah, I can understand not wanting her in movies. I hate moves that she's in.
But this
Well,
is
wait,
why I
but
brought it-
hang
that's
on,
why
but
I
people
brought
were
up
upset
the
about
fact-
that because
Chris,
of
it's your
source
turn.
material.
You, Chris, go ahead. You, Chris,
Hang on,
and
no,
then
but
Layman.
that's an interesting example, right? Because people were also upset about that because of source material, right? Because like this,
No.
because of the inspiration for the character was this drag queen, and like that was part of the backlash culturally against this. Part of it. I'm not saying it's all of it. Hang on. So the broader point, though, I think what like Wizard of Weed brought this up is this is just going to depend on what sort of world you're asking me to accept. Like, are we diving into fantasy and even fairy tale? Because then I don't totally understand
Yeah,
Doobie's standard
like
here. Maybe
that-
you can
that-
articulate it more. But like, if you're asking me to accept a fantastical world where I've already suspended significant amounts of disbelief, then the casting matters very, very little
Like-
to me, unless this is a story like an ugly duckling kind of story where the point is they're a social outcast in some way because of some physical characteristic or because of race. If you want to make it about that in that reimagining, right? If that's the point of the story, then yes, that person should be different in some way, right? But if you're just already asking me to accept a world of fantasy and the racial differences aren't an essential part of the story that you're telling, that's fine. But if you're asking me to enter into like an immersive biopic where like, yeah, maybe as Doobie and Prime have both said, is the point a reimagining or is the point just telling a really cool historical story the way that it might have been, right? Then yeah, it's going to pull me out of it a little bit if you have like one random person who we know was not black cast as a black person. So what's distracting and detracting from the story depends on the medium, the content, the genre, and the style. So it just depends, right? Like I think that's sort of what we're all getting at.
Yeah,
I think we can unite a couple of the takes, the like it's just capitalism and the we should strive for more representational takes. Like we've listed a bunch of examples of really profitable representational movies, right? So recent Disney movies, Joe, you mentioned Crazy Rich Asians, like Get Out, right? These were hits at the box office. And then there's other examples of movies that like maybe weren't such like great financial propositions, but like were super well reviewed, super award winning, like If Beale Street Could Talk in
Oscar bait.
2018, right? Like these movies that are like adaptations of really good black stories. I would love to see more of those. I think we should have more of those. Like, yeah, we should adapt more of these stories. A24 is adapting Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. I hope that is amazing, right? That's going to be awesome.
Like,
have more
or even
like that, please.
Yeah, or even like people wanted, like people are still like within Black Twitter. Well, actually, let me rephrase, Black liberal Twitter, like demanding that Kindred get adapted, like and like stuff like that. Something that I'm wondering, Eucharist, how do you feel? And this might be something that maybe Wizard of Weed and Top Dolphin might be able to answer. What are your thoughts on the term like race swapping, or I guess ethnicity swapping, when it comes to the diaspora wars? Because something that I thought was really weird to see were people upset about West Side Story, the casting of Rachel Zegler. And for those of you who don't know, Rachel Zegler is Colombian, and I think I want to say Portuguese, but I know she's Colombian. And people were really, really upset that even in the most diverse cast of West Side Story, they still can't find a Puerto Rican woman to play Maria. And despite that, they casted a Puerto Rican woman, to play God, what's her name? I know the actress's name, Ariana DeBose, but like she was Puerto Rican. She won an Oscar for her role. And it's like it's kind of wild how like even in the face of like we could probably do this right, they still like do an offcast. But like there were people just arguing about like why that's fucked up.
I mean, people got really mad too about both the stage and film versions of In the Heights too, right? Because it kind of like excluded like Afro-Latina people. So like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about those communities or the kind of like the backlash from that direction, I guess. Like to me it does like it sounds like you have like white directors, maybe white casting directors who just don't know those details, and maybe they should talk to people more. Disney apparently has done this well with some of the movies like Coco. Like they had a lot of people consulting from a lot of different backgrounds to be able to give good insight about what sorts of things like that could be offensive names and things like that, right?
It started with Moana.
I think
they hired
Layman. Let's go Layman.
Yeah.
I just adding context.
Tiana the Frog. The Princess and the Frog.
I don't know.
Layman.
I don't know.
Layman.
Okay. Oh, I'm okay.
Layman.
Now you choose to moderate. All right.
Shut up. Thanks. I can moderate you again. Don't worry. I'll just moderate you. Only you. Thank you. Layman.
Damn,
please.
you got a special place in Prime's heart now.
It's every panel. It's fine.
Go ahead, Layman, please.
I was gonna say something so long ago. I don't even remember what it is now because all that shit. I just feel like we got to move on because like it's circling and circling and circling. And like I feel like the whole conversation you could just avoid it if you did what like Fabian and Doobie recommended, which is just to have more representation of like other different cultures, like non-white cultures.
Hey, but that's not.
That doesn't avoid the conversation.
Let me finish. Fuck. Anyway.
Okay, counterpoints. Calm down.
It's okay. Respect to the weed wizard. It's okay. So fuck, what was I gonna say? Yeah, anyway, like I just feel like you could avoid it if you like focused a lot on those African like African lore, for example, is like really fucking cool. And there actually is some examples of that came out recently. So like there's this really fucking cool movie that my person recommended called His House. It's like this really like critically acclaimed fucking
that's a great movie.
Yeah. And it touches on African folklore. It's about a refugee couple that basically like they escape the refugees from the war in South Sudan, and they're trying to like adjust to their new life in like this English town, and there's all this like evil fucking demonic shit happening in this like English town that's based on African folklore. You could have more stories like that. That one seems to do well. And that's a fairly new movie, so it seems like there's a lot of potential for that. And I think that you could avoid this whole conversation if you just focused on that. No one was talking about diversity.
Wait, time out.
No, sorry. I'll do it.
Can I please respond to
I'll do it.
Please.
like this idea, you can go next. But
Okay.
this idea that it avoids the conversation, no, it doesn't. That's another part of the conversation. Like this conversation is talking about those race swaps. Yes, it would be great. Everyone already agreed. It'd be great if we told more black stories. Literally, literally no one disagreed about that part. But that's not the part. Obviously, that's controversial. We're talking about the controversial part. The controversial part is when you switch the races of characters. So that's why we're talking about it. Like it's like it doesn't avoid anything. This is the part that we disagree with. So that's why we're talking about this part. It makes sense. Thank you. All right.
I have a question.
So for
Pyro Doobie.
Fuck.
For me, like, it seems like we're just avoiding the bigger question because, like Prime said, we're talking about race swapping, and while we have hit on like the historical shit and like we need to tell better stories, we're not moving into the fantasy side. We tried to with the Little Mermaid, and then we got some bullshit about like, oh, how the original story was this, you know, it was about a red-headed girl, and then Eucharist hit it on the point. I'm accepting mermaids. I'm accepting a singing Melissa Carthy as an octopus woman, and then you're telling me no, it's all weird because she's black. I'm not worried about the historical shit now because we've tapped that down. I'm worried about the Time Lords and the Sith and the Jedi and all of this fantastical shit that people get their knickers in a twist about because, oh, they're black now. That's diversity casting. Even though there's established lore, we understand that these things can be rewritten. We understand if they're not good, like something like The Last Airbender by M. Night Shyamalan, the fandom at whole can choose, yo, we're just not going to acknowledge that. If that's not your cup of tea, you can be like, yo, I don't acknowledge this. I'm going to stick with the shit I like. That is something people do. That is something that happened. But like to pretend that we can't rewrite these things, especially books for adaptations, and then that the idea that people are just going to sit down when they're reading like some fantasy novel, like, oh, wait, this isn't right. He's supposed to be white because the Eurocentric, you know, mindset and shit. That doesn't make sense. No one does that. No one sits down and looks at this and be like, oh, that's not right because when they designed this character, it was supposed to be white. When we're talking about shit like Time Lords, okay? If that takes you out of the story of Doctor Who fighting alien robots or Darth Vader fighting people with laser sticks, you have to explain that to me because I don't understand how skin color can take you out of the world of lightsabers and Daleks and shit because that's wild to me. I'm more focused on the sci-fi shit.
Doobie, then Wick.
So I have a question actually about a side of this that I don't think we've touched on enough. This is for my black brothers, right? So does it bother you that when you're basically on here arguing for the right of black actors and authors and writers and whatnot to insert themselves into European folklore, European
We're
story?
not talking about folklore, dude.
I'm
We're
not
talking
done.
about
I'm not done.
sci-fi
I'm not
fantasy,
done.
bro.
I'm not
Sci-fi
done.
fantasy. I'm not gonna let you change
I
it.
said stories. I said
Let
stories
him
at the end of that. Okay, believe it or not, Star Wars. You know that's a story told by a white guy with white characters primarily, right? I think there was like one black guy in the original trilogy. Really quickly, but so you guys are arguing for your insertion into what I would consider like a white media. Right. And typically when we do get black stories, they're about being enslaved, about being oppressed, about being victims and all that. You don't ever see, it's extremely rare that you see a black story told where the black people aren't being oppressed, right? Aren't being slaves, aren't being murdered and chased and shit like that. Right. And I think, isn't that a little bit twisted? I feel like that would, if all I saw of people that look like me in the media, right, in movies and shit that came out was that they're oppressed and they're attacked and they were enslaved and all this kind of shit. And every few years, we have another slave movie, right, to feel bad about, right? I feel like I'd feel pretty shitty, right, about the way that I think that everybody else, when they look at me, they see a slave, right? They see someone who's a victim and oppressed.
Sure.
Right?
So,
So
Doobie,
why wouldn't please? Yeah. So like, I don't understand like why continue to advocate or push for that to continue?
we're not.
I mean,
Okay,
we-
hold on,
I
wait,
mean,
wait. Time
Because
out,
all
time out.
you
Wait,
get,
wait, wait.
it seems like
Time out,
what you're
wait,
saying
hold on,
is what you deserve is like the crumbs of like these white characters
No,
that they're
that's
willing
not
to.
what
stick you
that's
with.
not what anyone said, Doobie. And the fact that you completely dodged my last point proves it. Because I'm not saying, oh, we shouldn't be telling other stories. I agree with that. I agree because that was the earlier conversation that when we get is Civil War stories or civil rights stories or yo, look at this guy. Yeah, that's bad. We should diversify. But we're talking about fantasy now. We're talking about Jedi and shit. So when we do shit like, oh, Doctor Who is black now, or oh, like, you know, one of these fantasy characters is black,
Nobody
why
cares
is
about
that a problem? No,
Wait,
you
hold on.
can't say no. You can't
please,
say no.
please, wait. So on this panel, wait, hold on. So on this panel, nobody cares. Nobody would say that Doctor Who being black is an issue, right?
No
Nobody
one on
here
this
cares.
panel, but when we're
Wait,
talking
please,
about gender,
please. So, and we acknowledged earlier, they're stupid people who have knee-jerk reactions, and when they have those knee-jerk reactions, like they're getting upset about Miles Morales or about James, the new 007 being black, dismiss those people because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they're stupid, right? They're probably just racist. Who cares, right? So yeah, that's the only reason. But we're saying that hey, when you're in outside of like Doctor Who, where it makes sense for this person could be black or could be a woman, right? We in places with like established lore, with characters that are established that have like fans going back decades and shit like that. If you just suddenly swap out the race or make this guy gay or trans or whatever the fuck, there are going to be people that are going to be upset because you've changed this character, and I think in a pretty serious way for no fucking reason. It doesn't make any sense within the story. It doesn't add anything to the story.
Well,
All you've done is make somebody black.
well, here's the thing, right? It's science fiction, so they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Oh, that's silly.
And people are going to react. What do you mean it's silly? It's science fiction. Science
silly.
fiction is silly. We have people in iron suits
Yeah,
fighting
so if
niggas in
you had-
space with stones.
Yeah,
that
so
can
if you
alter
had
reality.
a
This shit
Black
is
Panther
stupid.
and it's a bunch of like white Europeans in Wakanda,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just silly.
Yeah,
It's just
Marvel
sci-fi. You know, who
created-
cares?
Marvel
It's not a
wanted
question.
black people. Marvel wanted black people, so they created an African country that doesn't exist and literally made the magical Negro stereotype that was isolationist in the
It's not magical
continent of
Negro. What
Africa.
the fuck?
This is literally magical Negro personified.
No, it isn't.
I
Okay,
mean-
there's tons of magical white people. The entire fucking Marvel thing is magical people
Magical-
generally.
wait, are we just
Why
gonna
would you
ignore
point
the
out?
magical
Why would you
Negro
point out
stereotype?
specifically? Oh
you don't know
god,
what a
they made
troll
a
is, Doobie.
they
That's
made a
what it
black
is.
person
See,
magical,
yeah.
so therefore it's a magical
Wow,
Negro trope.
bro.
Okay,
We
can black
got-
people
does
not be
have a
magical
trope.
ever
We
in
gotta-
media?
we gotta-
We're not-
understand.
it's
We
so
got
ridiculous.
to move forward. Sorry, we got to move forward. We have very little time left. I mean, actually, we're over time for this topic, so I just want to get Wick in because Wick has been waiting. Sorry,
Wow.
layman, knock it off. Don't do that. Don't do that on my stream.
Sorry.
Absolutely, don't do that. Don't fuck around with that at all. Wick.
Oh, I wonder. So I understand your point, Pyro, right? And I understand your point. Like, it's fantasy, and why not, right? But when we come to continuity, like, it would be very weird if you were watching the first Star Wars movie, right? And then in The Empire Strikes Back, all the races were reversed. It would being jarring. It would be, with no explanation, right? If they all of a sudden Luke Skywalker was black from one movie to the next, they started white and he went black. That would be jarring. It would take you out of the story. It would be bad storytelling, especially if there's no reason to rhyme given, right? So I could think we can at least point to areas where if this is done, it could be done poorly and in a very bad way. Would you
I don't
disagree?
even agree with. Yeah,
That-
I
wait,
disagree with
hold
that
on, that's
example.
a-
Hold on. Top Dolphin, that was addressed to me. You're not Pyro. Hold on. I would agree with
Apparently
that
I'm
example.
Pyro.
Like, yeah, we're all Pyro now. I'm the wizard of weed, bro. Like,
The
when we're
warlock
talking,
knock.
yeah,
Oh, sorry.
like when we're talking about shit like Star Wars and the example you gave, like if they made the movie and then all of a sudden Luke Skywalker is black, they don't it's simply like, yo, we recasted the dude and we picked the best person. Like, we have examples where they do that, where it's like, oh, we simply just recast the person. We simply chose the best person. I mean, there was an anime like with character Motoko Kawasagi, and like she's an established Japanese character. She was, made white, and like no one really had a problem with that. They were like, yo, they picked the best person for the spot, and like that they kind of just like flipped the page on that one. So it's like, yeah, I can understand where it's like, yeah, if they do something like that, where early on in the production, like early on in the movie productions and shit, they're like, oh, we're just gonna like recast or change the character, unless they're like, we're doing it for black people and this is actually a lore point. Like, it's not, because like Luke Skywalker's race is not integral to the plot. There's nothing about Yoda that's like, only the whites can handle the Force. Like, there's nothing
I
with that.
get that,
So
but my
it
point
wouldn't
is-
be anything. There's nothing to
Okay.
the lore. There's nothing with like history.
But it would
So like,
be
what would be
jarring
the
from a narrative standpoint. And when they do
Why?
recast it,
Just
Why?
like if you cast another white
Wait.
man, like a randomly another
Wait.
white man, and people don't understand, it's drawing when you replace people with people. Hold on, we gotta
Why
move on. We
is-
gotta move on. We gotta
Wait,
move on. We gotta
but
move
I
on.
think-
Top Dolphin, I want to get you last point, and then we gotta move on to the next topic.
Yeah. So the only thing I want to push back against Wick's example, because what you're talking about is close, but it's like that almost never happens.
So in my opinion, I hate when they swap actors or like characters at all. When they swapped the Peter Parker animated person and from the original PS4 game to the Miles Morales game, they changed how Peter Parker looked. It actually blew my mind and it made the immersion terrible. I agree with you that like changing characters, but when we're talking about like for the most part, we're talking about like reboots, right? We're not talking about their like it's almost like you have a book, right? And when you write that book, if you were to switch the name of the character like halfway through the book or halfway even through like a series of books, that would be like kind of fucked. But when you're like, we're gonna take this series of books and we're gonna redo it again, and you recast the character differently, like if you want to be like, oh my god, that like ruins the immersion, well, it's not the same story, and like you can change it however you want. And if they want to change it and put like actors like that are black in there, like who or Asian or whatever, who gives a fuck? Right? Okay. If it doesn't, like people, whenever you reboot something, you make choices, and race can be one of those choices. And if you want to criticize a character for being bad, or you want to criticize a plot for being bad, do it. But like when all of these people come out ahead of time and they're like, oh my god, Ariel's black, you're ruining my childhood, because this is literally one of my friends on Facebook. One of my friends on Facebook literally said, you're ruining my childhood Little Mermaid. Well, no, it's not your childhood Little Mermaid. It's the 2020 whatever. It hasn't come out yet. It's been announced like for years, but it's like the 2025 Little Mermaid, and you gotta accept that it's not the same fucking thing and get over it and watch the new shit and see if it's good or not.